Hello, adventurers! Continuing on our journey to learn about the games of the gods, this lesson will teach you all about the most popular ball and board games in ancient Egypt. We are going to be looking at a series of games and pastimes from ancient Egypt, some of which we still play today. In particular, we are going to look at the history of ball games that ancient Egyptians might have invented. Next, we will look at some of the most popular board games in ancient Egypt and how they were played. Throughout this presentation, we will also talk about how we know that these games were played in ancient Egypt. Let's get started. One of the types of games that we have a lot of evidence from ancient Egypt is ball games. One of the places where we've seen a lot of evidence of the ball games and sports played in ancient Egypt come from Beni Hassan. Beni Hassan in Egypt is an ancient burial complex that contains over 900 tombs. The complex was used throughout the 21st and 17th centuries BCE, 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. The tombs at Beni Hassan are decorated with highly detailed hieroglyphics and images that tell stories about all aspects of life in ancient Egypt. One tomb in particular has helped us understand a lot more about the popular games played by ancient Egyptians. Let's take a closer look. The tomb of Khedi I, seen here, has walls covered in detailed images that show off the daily activities of ancient Egyptians. The images covering the walls of this tomb show scenes of daily life such as agricultural and farming practices, but there is also an entire section dedicated to leisure activities, including popular games and sports. One interesting activity that we see represented in the leisure section of this tomb is ball games. As you can see in the first image, there are games and activities that we still recognize today. This image shows a group of Egyptians juggling. This is actually the oldest discovered depiction of juggling, which means that it is an activity that might have been invented in ancient Egypt. The images in the tomb of Khedi also show other popular games played with balls. This second image shows off some kind of catching game played with 4 players, sort of like a cross between catch and a game of dodgeball. There is even one image in the tomb of Khedi that shows 2 players playing some kind of stick and ball game, which might be an early version of the sport we know as field hockey. In addition to ball games, the leisure section of the tomb of Khedi shows a lot of different physical activities and sports like wrestling, gymnastics, dancing, and more. However, ancient Egyptians also liked to spend time playing less physically active games. In addition to games of skill and physical activity, ancient Egyptians also passed the time by playing board games. The pharaoh Tutankhamun was especially fond of board games, and he is the reason we know so much about this popular pastime. Tutankhamun was the youngest Egyptian pharaoh, becoming ruler when he was only 8 years old. When he died, Tutankhamun was buried with some of his favorite items, many of which were different Egyptian board games that he would use to pass the time as a young king. The most common game in Tutankhamun's tomb was the popular board game Senet. Senet is a 2-player board game that is played on a board with 30 squares. Each player starts with 5 game pieces, and the goal of the game is to get all 5 of your game pieces across to the other side of the board before your opponent. Senet was a very popular board game that wasn't just played by children. There are multiple depictions of Egyptian royalty playing this game, such as this image of Queen Nefertari with her Senet board. This may be the most well-known Egyptian board game, but it wasn't the only one they played. Some other common board games that have been found in Egyptian tombs are Mehen and Hounds and Jackals. Mehen was played on a circular board with an eye in the middle, and players would travel from the outside of the circle to the inside. The game board was coiled like a snake to represent the snake god Mehen, who protected the sun god Ra by coiling around him. Hounds and Jackals, or 58 holes, is played on a game board with holes in it. Players would win the game by moving all 5 of their game pieces from one side of the board to the other. Instead of using dice to gain points or determine number of spaces to move game pieces like we do today, Ancient Egyptians used throw sticks or throw bones. These sticks had two sides, one colored or marked and the other side blank. Players would throw a handful of these sticks, and the number of sticks that landed with the marked side up would determine how many squares a player could move. As you can see, the games and activities played by ancient Egyptians are similar to the games and activities that we still play today. Senet is actually an early version of the game we now call backgammon. Although we don't have direct parallels to games like Mehen or Hounds and Jackals, there are many board games that have similar objectives, like Sorry, Candyland, or the Game of Life. The sports and physical activities ancient Egyptians loved are still with us today, although juggling isn't as common as other sports. Activities like wrestling, gymnastics, boxing, and hockey are all still in play after 4,000 years. Thanks for watching. We hope you've learned a little bit about the similarities and differences between our pastimes and those of ancient Egypt. Get into the ancient tradition of juggling by creating your very own Egyptian-style juggling balls. Our WordPress video will show you how to make this craft and then teach you the basics of learning to juggle. Don't forget to check out the extras on our WordPress page to take a virtual tour of the Tomb of Keti and see the hieroglyphs firsthand.